Hello and welcome to the video. In this video I'll be walking you through building a basic website. The first thing you'll need to do is create a new project in PHP Storm. You can put it wherever you're storing your projects. The second step is to create an HTML file called index.html. Once that's done, we'll go into the index.html file and begin. The first tag that we need is the Doctype tag. This is Doctype preceded by an exclamation point followed by HTML. This is to inform the browser which version of HTML we are using, in this case HTML5. Next, we need HTML tags. This is to inform the browser when the HTML starts. Within the HTML tag, we'll need a head, and a body. The head is where you store all the information and imports for the page. This would include things like the title, here, demo project, meta tags, in this case charset, which we will set to UTF-8, which is an encoding standard. And later on, we'll include other files into our project, like CSS. Within the body, we're going to add an H1 tag. This is a headings tag. This informs the browser that you want the text that's within this tag to be very large. Let's just call it My First Website. Next, we'll have a paragraph tag. Paragraph tags are typically used to denote blocks of text. Here, I want to put extra emphasis on HTML and CSS. So we use something called strong and emphasis. The strong will make the HTML bold. This emphasis tag will make the CSS italicized. As you can see, we can include these types of tags, known as inline tags, within text that are inside other tags. Next, we're going to make two lists. First thing, we're going to surround these lists with div tags. Div tags just inform the browser that there's a division. Now we're going to have an H2 tag. Let's call this HTML Learning Goals. These lists don't have any particular order, so use something called an unordered list, denoted here by UL. An ordered list is OL, and will replace the bullet points here with numbers. Inside the UL tag, we'll need a tag for each list item. These are called list tags, or LI. As you can see, we're already on our way to meet our learning goals for HTML. We've started to understand the page structure. Things like head, body, and the way the tags are nested within each other. And tag types. Here, we can see many different types of tags, such as list items, unordered lists, headings, tags, divs, body, etc. We'll look at attributes and linking and other resources soon. Pause the video now and see if you can make a list of CSS Learning Goals that includes what properties are, how you use elements and element attributes to change styles, how CSS styles cascade, and how to include these styles. Welcome back. Were you able to figure it out? If you look on my screen, it's not too different from the first list that we made. Let's check our progress in the browser. In PHP Storm, there are these icons here that allow you to open these pages within a web page. You also have the option of going into the folder where it's stored on your file of browser and double-clicking it. This should open a browser to the page. As you can see, we're well on our way to creating our first website. Here's our H1 tag, our H2 tags, our lists, and our paragraph. As you can see within the paragraph, the HTML is bold and the CSS is italicized, just like we defined in our document. Next, we're going to create a table. You've probably seen tables in websites that you browsed before. Tables are comprised of the main table tag, table rows, and the headings and data within those rows. Here, we'll create a table row that will contain our headings. Table row is just TR, much like LI and UL. It's just an abbreviation. Next, we'll do table heading. It's a similar idea to table row. TH. We'll call this table heading 1, and then we'll duplicate this. Now we have 4 table headings. Next, we're going to create table data. Table data is just TD. We'll follow the same conventions that we did with table heading. Since this is the row 1, we'll do it with 1 in the first position. And since it's the position 1 of row 1, we'll put a 1 here. We'll duplicate these again. I want to note that copying and pasting things can be a dangerous practice. It can be very easy to make mistakes this way. If you decide to copy and paste inside your code, be very, very careful and make sure that you've changed everything that you need to change. I'll quickly duplicate this so we have 3 rows of table data. I've duplicated the table data rows and changed the numbers appropriately. Let's check in with our web page on the browser. As you can see, we can see the table headings and the table data here. But this is kind of confusing. Each of the data cells is pretty much butted up against every other cell. We'll fix this later when we go over CSS. For now, our page is pretty boring because it doesn't go anywhere. We'll fix this problem by adding a link. Links are inline elements just like the strong or emphasis tags. We can put them within other tags and surround text that we want to use as a link. Links are denoted by A. A means anchor. We'll soon create a page 2, but we'll put the link in now anyways. When you're linking to things in the same folder, you'll put a period. The period is commonly used in Unix systems and Windows systems to denote the same folder that the file is in, followed by a / and then page2.html. Save this, and let's check back in the browser. As you can see, this is now a clickable link, but it doesn't go anywhere. Let's create page 2 now. Now that we have page 2 created, we'll need to put in the doc type, HTML, head, and body tags like we've done before. Pause the video and see if you can do this yourself. And we're back. Could you do it? As you can see, it's the same structure that we had before, with the doc type denoting the HTML5 standard, setting the document's language to English, setting the char set to UTF-8, and creating the title, in this case, page 2. Inside this body, we're going to create a form. Forms are one of the standard element types that you'll see on a web page. We open this form with the form tag. This is pretty self-explanatory. Action denotes the URL that the form will post to. For now, since we don't have anywhere for this form to post, we'll just put a hashtag. This form is going to have 2 inputs and a submit button. We're going to surround these inputs with div tags. This is to make the styling easier later on. We're also going to need a label for the input. This is to help browsers and screen readers tell what the form input is. In this case, name. Next, we're going to need an input. Again, this is a pretty self-explanatory tag. There are many different types for inputs. In this case, we're going to use text. Text is simply a one-line text input form. We're going to set the name to name to match the label here, and also give it an ID of name. When we began working with HTML, we talked about our learning goals. We talked about attributes. All of these that are not the tag itself are called attributes. This tells the browser special features about each tag. In this case, we're giving an ID of name and a name of name, and the type of text. ID and name are ways that we can identify this input. Type, as we talked about before, just tells the browser what kind of input this is. Next, we're going to make a message input. In this case, we're going to use a special input type called text area. This allows for a large, multi-line text input. The attributes cols and rows says how many columns and how many rows are within the text input. In this case, 30 columns or 30 letters, and rows, 10. Now we need a way to submit this form. We're going to create a button. Give it the type of submit, and set the text inside of it to submit. The text inside of here doesn't matter, but the type does. That's our form. If we had somewhere for this to post to, and we replace this hashtag with its URL, we'd be able to submit this form with name and message and get the data from it. Next, we're going to link back to our first page. Let's check back in with the browser. Now we're on our first page. When I click the page 2 link, now that we've created page 2, we'll go to our form. As you can see, we have name, which is followed by the standard text input, message, which is followed by the text area, and our submit button. When we submit it, since we're submitting it to the same page, which is what the hashtag refers to, you can see that name and message are available here. If we change these values, the values will also change in the URL. This isn't always necessarily the case, depending on what method that you're using to submit the form. You'll go over the different methods within class. So now our 2 pages are done. but we have a problem. They're not very nice to look at. This is where CSS comes in. CSS, or Cascading Style Sheet, is a way to style our HTML and change the way it looks. I want you to create a new directory within your project and call it Styles. Within Styles, we'll create a new file called style.css. The first thing we're going to style is our H1 tag here. We're going to change the color to make it more interesting. First, we're going to denote H1. This is to tell CSS which element that we're going to operate on. When denoting elements like this, it will affect every H1 element that this style is included on. So if you had more than one H1 element, they would all be green. Next, we're going to get rid of these bullet points by saying li list dash style none. These two things here, color green and list style colon none, are what are known as properties. Every element has a set of properties that you can affect. There are many of these, and we won't go over them all today. You can do additional study to find out more. Next, we're going to give our table some style to make it so that each data point isn't bunched up together like this. We're going to give the table a style property of border collapse and set that to collapse. Next, we're going to give our table data, and table head a border. As you can see, I can affect multiple element types by following each element type with a comma. Let's check back in with our page. When I refresh, nothing's changed. That's because we haven't included the CSS within our project. If you remember, in our HTML Learning Goals, we talked about linking in other resources. We'll do this now. For CSS, we need to make a link tag. Here, we denote that this link talks about a style sheet. href is a link, much like we had in our anchor tag here. It works similarly. We use a period to denote the same folder that we're working in with this file, a / followed by CSS, or rather styles, style.css. Now we've included the style.css file within our project. When we go back to our browser, you can see that our table has a border and our heading is green, and our list elements don't have bullet points anymore. Let's say that we want to affect only the HTML list and give it a different styling. Currently, all of our list elements will be affected by the list style none, but in our case, we want to affect the HTML lists and set their style to, say, a square bullet point. To do this, we'll need to add an attribute called class. The class attribute allows us to affect and address multiple tags at once. And only affect those tags. It's a lot like addressing them by their element name, except we specify what the name is. The way you access a class is by preceding it with a period, followed by the name. As you can see, PHP Storm is autofilling this for us. HTML list. We're going to give this HTML list a style of square. As you can see, the bullet points have become square. But we haven't affected the CSS list. We can affect the CSS list in the same way. Let's say we want to set the color to blue. As you can see, our HTML, or rather our CSS list, is now blue. Something that I want to change is how all of these elements are butted up against the wall. We'll do this by centering them. To do this, we'll create a center class, set the width to 100, the margin to auto. This margin auto will evenly fill the space between the parent element's content walls and the inner element's margin walls. This is just the box model. If you're not aware what the box model is, there should be videos on the Deep Dive website that detail this. We're also going to set the text alignment to center. Since we haven't added this class to anything, nothing will change. So we'll do this now. We'll center all of our content. As you can see now, our elements are beginning to become centered. If you notice, I didn't need to add the class center onto every single element. This is the cascading part of the styles. Not all style properties operate like this, but in this case the ones that we're using do. When you set the properties on their parent elements, they will cascade down into their child elements, like this. They will cascade down until they are overwritten by their child element's properties. Again, some properties don't cascade, but in this case the ones that we're covering do. To demonstrate this further, we'll address the body as a whole. Set the color to red and see how it affects our document. As you can see, everything within the body is now red, except the CSS list and our header, which we have overwritten previously. We'll get rid of this style. Something weird is happening with our list though. The bullet points are butted up against the wall of the page, and our text is centered here. We'll need to create a new class to fix this. We'll call it center list. We'll set the width to 50%. This is to prevent these bullet points from being butted up against the page. Here we add a list style position of inside a text align of left, and a display of inline block. Nothing's changed because we haven't added our class. We'll add this class to the unordered list tag. That looks better. You can play with these properties to see if you can get it to become more centered. However, knowing which properties to use will come with experience. Next, we'll move into styling our form. We'll also need to include this file on the form, like so. Later on in your learning, you'll learn about technologies that prevent this duplication. Duplication is generally a bad thing, as it can lead to errors. All we're going to do for our form is make sure that name and message, our labels, are on top of our inputs. To do this, we're going to address them by their element name. Save the file and reload. As you can see, the name and message are on top. What display block does is treat each one of these elements as a block that goes across the screen. This allows them to stack on top of each other. Certain elements have default displays. Some are inline, some are block, and others can be inline block. However, I don't like how close these are together. To change this, we're going to give these a different margin. We're going to set the top margin to 0.3 EM. EM is a way to set size based on the user's browser's default font size. As you can see, when I refresh the page, there's a small amount of margin that has been added to the name, label, the input, and the message. We also need to address text area here to give it a margin. It now has a margin between its upper border and the message label. That's our first website. As you can see, we've met all of our learning goals. From the page structure of HTML, to how to include CSS styles on HTML pages. We also learned how to link pages together and how to create forms. Practice some more creating some basic websites. I look forward to seeing what you can make in the future.